In the midst of a heated political season, where every word spoken has the potential to spark outrage or admiration, a young conservative woman stands poised for a moment that will challenge everything the left-wing establishment thinks it knows about her. Have you ever witnessed someone fight back so hard that it not only shifts the debate but leaves their opponent floundering, questioning their every belief? This isn't a simple clash of ideologies. It's a battle of wits, charisma, and public perception. An explosive moment when one voice can drown out the crowd and change the narrative. It's a late summer evening in New York City, the heartbeat of liberal politics and media. The lights of skyscrapers twinkle in the distance, a symbol of the progressive power structure that dominates the city. But inside the walls of one of the most influential news networks, the air is thick with tension. Karoline Leavitt, a rising star in conservative circles, is about to be interviewed by one of the network's most vocal liberal hosts. The scene is set for a confrontation that has been brewing for months, ever since Karoline first burst onto the political stage, challenging the status quo. Karoline, in her early 20s, radiates a confidence far beyond her years. With sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, she represents a new wave of young conservatives who refuse to be silenced by the overwhelming influence of left-leaning media. Known for her fiery speeches and quick retorts, she's become a lightning rod for both praise and criticism. Her social media followers hang on her every word, while her critics attempt to label her as everything from a puppet of the far right to a political opportunist. But tonight, it's not just about politics. This interview has become personal. The liberal host, known for his condescending tone and penchant for mockery, has made a career of belittling people like Karoline. He sees her as an easy target, someone he can easily discredit with a sharp jab or a dismissive laugh. But what he doesn't know is that Karoline is prepared. She knows exactly what's at stake here. The camera's red light blinks on, the signal that the broadcast has started, and the moment of reckoning arrives. Karoline Leavitt, with a smile that masks her inner fire, sits across from her opponent, ready to turn the tables. The host begins with his usual air of superiority, mocking her values, making cheap jokes about her beliefs. But he has underestimated her, and in that underestimation, he is about to make the gravest mistake of his career. The crowd watching at home might not know it yet, but this will be the moment that Karoline's fire burns brighter than ever. The question is, will her response be enough to shift the narrative? The liberal host leans forward, a self-satisfied grin spreading across his face as the cameras roll. His voice is dripping with mockery as he begins the segment. So, Karoline, you've spent the past year championing conservative causes on social media, calling out the left for their so-called woke agenda. But let's be real here. You're just a puppet, following orders from the same people who've hijacked the Republican Party. Aren't you just another talking head in the vast sea of empty rhetoric? The words hang in the air, almost as if daring Karoline to flinch. He continues, eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a verbal takedown. His audience behind the camera undoubtedly salivating at the thought of watching a young conservative squirm under the weight of his scorn. Karoline's chest tightens. For a moment, the sting of the words feels like a sharp jab, aimed right at the heart of everything she's worked for. But instead of retreating or becoming defensive, she inhales deeply. The familiar rush of determination floods her veins, and she straightens her posture, feeling a sense of calm certainty. This is the moment she's been waiting for. With a steady, yet fierce, smile, she meets his gaze. "You really don't get it, do you?" she begins, her voice cool and unwavering. "You think that because I'm young and conservative, I'm just some puppet, some tool being used by the so-called right-wing elite. But here's the thing you're missing. I'm not here to be anyone's pawn. I'm here because I believe in what I'm fighting for." The host stumbles, momentarily thrown off balance. The audience, too, seems uncertain. The set, once buzzing with the energy of mockery, falls into an unsettling silence as Karoline continues. "I'm not going to sit here and let you belittle everything I stand for," she presses on. "I'm not following anyone's orders. I'm following my own convictions, ones that have been shaped by my family, my experiences, and my country." Her words are sharp, cutting through the mockery like a knife. The host's grin falters as Karoline's rebuttal lands harder than he anticipated. It's clear to anyone watching that this moment marks the turning point. What began as a routine, interview has transformed into something far more significant. A confrontation between ideologies, yes, but also a challenge to the establishment's hold on power. Behind the cameras, her producer, Sarah, watches with bated breath. Karoline and Sarah have been through it all together. The long nights crafting speeches, the strategy sessions, the endless debates on social media. Sarah knows Karoline's fight isn't just against a hostile host, but against the entire system that attempts to suppress voices like hers. The stakes are high now. This moment could either make or break Karoline's credibility, and Sarah can feel the weight of it all. The host, now visibly irritated, prepares to strike back, but something has shifted in the air. Karoline is no longer the underdog. She's a force to be reckoned with, and the world is watching. The catalyst has been set into motion. The atmosphere in the studio crackles with tension as Karoline's words hang in the air. The host, momentarily taken aback, regains his composure and leans in, his tone sharp, mocking. "Well, aren't you feisty?" he sneers. "But let's get one thing clear, Karoline. You may think you're a trailblazer, but you're just another puppet. All those beliefs you claim to have are nothing but recycled talking points designed to keep people like you in power." Karoline's pulse quickens, but she refuses to let his words rattle her. She knows better than to let him control the narrative. She's been in situations like this before. Debates where they try to paint her as naive, uninformed, or worse, a mouthpiece for a movement she doesn't fully understand. But something feels different now. This moment feels bigger. She takes a breath, ready to counter. But before she can speak, the host cuts her off, addressing the camera with a smug grin. "Folks, let's be honest. We all know what Karoline is here for. She's here to make a name for herself. And let's not pretend that the right isn't full of people who'd love to see someone like her climb the ranks. It's a jab designed to hit below the belt, to reduce her to nothing more than a political opportunist." Karoline feels a flicker of doubt. A tiny voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, he's right. Maybe the world doesn't see her as a true advocate for change, but as someone who's simply trying to play the game for fame, for power. The doubt lingers in her chest, a knot of uncertainty. She had always believed in her cause. But here, under the harsh lights of the studio with millions of eyes watching, her resolve is tested in ways she never anticipated. She isn't just defending her beliefs anymore. She's defending herself. Who am I really fighting for? The question echoes in her mind. For a split second, she hesitates. Her heart races, and the weight of the cameras, the audience, and the stakes of this interview crush her confidence. Her eyes flicker to Sarah, seated, just off camera, a silent support she's relied on for so long. Sarah's presence grounds her. She sees the encouraging nod, the subtle gesture of, "You've got this," and it's enough to steady her. In that moment, Karoline makes a choice. She won't let him define her. She won't let his narrative stick. As the host continues to taunt her, she squares her shoulders, locks eyes with him, and the doubt fades into something far more powerful: determination. With a sharp inhale, Karoline opens her mouth, ready to shatter his world with the truth. But before she can speak, a sudden interruption comes from the control room. A technical issue, a delay, a momentary disruption. It's small, barely noticeable, but to Karoline, it feels like a sign. Her time is running out. The tension, which had been building steadily, now reaches a fever pitch. Can she regain control, or will the delay break her focus entirely? The clock is ticking. This interview is no longer just about defending her values. It's a fight to keep the narrative alive. The technical glitch in the control room sends a ripple of unease through the studio. The lights flicker for a split second, and for just a moment, Karoline thinks the world has paused. Like time itself is waiting for her to decide what comes next. The host, sensing an opportunity, leans back in his chair, his smug expression morphing into something more self-assured. "Well, it looks like we've hit a little snag, folks," he says, as though this minor interruption is his moment to reclaim the upper hand. But I suppose it gives Karoline a little more time to think about what she's really here to say. Karoline's heart races. She doesn't need more time to think. She doesn't need to second-guess herself. What she needs is action. The flicker of doubt she'd felt earlier resurfaces like a shadow, but this time, She recognizes it for what it is: fear. Fear of failure, fear of being dismissed, but more than that, fear of being forgotten. She's no longer just a young woman with bold ideas. She's become the embodiment of a movement. Every word she speaks is loaded with consequences, not just for herself, but for every person who's ever felt the sting of being underestimated. The world is watching, waiting for her to rise to the occasion. Just as Karoline is about to speak, something unexpected happens. The host, sensing that the moment of discomfort has passed, takes a more calculating approach. He leans forward again, this time with a softened tone that betrays a new level of cynicism. "You know," he begins, with an air of faux sympathy, "I think it's admirable, really, that you've made a name for yourself in this political climate. But the truth is, Karoline, you're not as much of an outsider as you think. You're just another cog in the machine. The only difference is you've found a way to make your voice sound more polished, more palatable to the masses. You've played the game better than most." The words feel like a sucker punch. A part of her wants to explode, to call out the host for his arrogance, but another part of her, an unexpected, unfamiliar part, feels a wave of realization wash over her. He's right. She has played the game. She spent years curating her image, perfecting her sound bites, and shaping her message. What if she's been too focused on playing their game, rather than making a statement that truly matters? A silence stretches between them. Karoline feels the weight of her own thoughts pressing in on her, the weight of everything she's ever fought for, her career, her beliefs, her very identity. All of it feels suddenly fragile, as though the walls around her have begun to crumble. And then, as though a switch has been flipped, a clarity emerges. She's no longer playing by the rules of an outdated, polarized political system. This moment is about something bigger. It's about truth, a truth she's been too afraid to confront. She isn't here to prove herself to the establishment. She's here to reshape the conversation, to speak the unfiltered truths that have been ignored for too long. "I'm not here to be just another voice in the crowd," Karoline says, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "I'm here to disrupt the crowd itself." The host freezes, his jaw tightening as Karoline's words hit him like a gust of cold air. The camera, capturing the tension between them, zooms in on her face, the fire in her eyes unmistakable. The audience at home, those tuning in, begin to sense something extraordinary unfolding. A shift, a sudden burst of authenticity from someone who had been cornered into playing by the establishment's rules. Karoline leans forward now, her eyes never leaving the host's. "I've spent too long playing by your rules, pretending that the game is fair, pretending that I'm supposed to fit into your mold. But you know what? I'm done. And you're about to see exactly who I am." The change is palpable. Karoline has stepped into her power, and nothing will ever be the same again. The tension in the studio is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Karoline's words hang in the air, reverberating with the power of a revelation. The host, visibly shaken for the first time, opens his mouth to respond but falters, unsure of how to react to this unexpected shift in the narrative. Karoline's confidence has surged in a way that's impossible to ignore. She's no longer the naive young woman he thought he could easily dismiss. The lights around them feel brighter now, the camera lens seeming to zoom in closer, capturing every subtle change in her expression. The audience, who had been skeptical and dismissive just moments ago, is now on the edge of their seats, hanging on to Karoline's every word. "You've spent the past few minutes trying to paint me as some kind of politician in the making, a puppet who repeats what others say," Karoline continues, her voice sharp and clear. "But here's the truth. I've been making my own choices. I'm not parroting anyone. I'm speaking for the millions who are tired of being told that their beliefs don't matter, that their voices shouldn't be heard because they don't fit some manufactured narrative that the elites have been pushing." For decades, her eyes narrow, her gaze locking with the host. "You think you figured me out. You think I'm just another cog in the machine, another pretty face to fill your agenda. But I've got news for you. I am the machine, and I'm here to dismantle it," the host sputters, visibly rattled by her boldness. This is not the interview he envisioned. He thought he could trap her, make her buckle under pressure, reduce her to a soundbite that fit his narrative. But Karoline has turned the tables. She's no longer reacting to his jabs. She's taking control of the conversation, commanding the spotlight. The audience at home, those tuning in across the nation, are watching her closely now. This isn't just a conservative woman speaking her truth. This is someone who is changing the rules of the game, someone who is refusing to let the system dictate her narrative. Her words are hitting home. They resonate with a growing movement of people who are tired of being dismissed, ignored, and stereotyped. But the host isn't ready to concede. He leans forward again, his tone laced with condescension, hoping to regain some control. So, what, Karoline? You think by tearing down the system you're going to fix things? The truth is, you're no different than any of the others. You want power, you want influence, but you're just another face in a crowded room. Karoline's face hardens. She takes a deep breath, knowing exactly what this moment requires. She won't back down. She's not here to prove him wrong. She's here to prove to herself and to everyone watching that her voice matters, that truth matters. No, you're wrong, she says slowly, each word deliberate. I'm not here for power. I'm here for the truth. And I'm not going to sit idly by while people like you distort it for your own gain. The host's eyes narrow, his posture defensive, but Karoline is unrelenting. She leans forward, mirroring his earlier stance, and finally, it clicks. This is no longer an interview. It's a showdown. The cameras are capturing every moment, every shift in their expressions, every word exchanged. In this instant, the stakes couldn't be higher. Karoline has laid herself bare, vulnerable, yet undeniably strong. She's made her stand, and there's no going back. But the real climax isn't just in the confrontation. It's in the realization that she has just shifted the very dynamic of the debate, not through anger or mockery, but through sheer resolve. The host, for the first time in his career, has been outmaneuvered. His facade is cracking, and the audience can see it. The world is watching a young woman rise to the occasion, challenging not just her opponent, but a broken system that's been in place far too long. The battle is far from over. But in this moment, Karoline has proven one undeniable truth. She's no longer a pawn in anyone's game. She's a force to be reckoned with. The host, now visibly flustered, glances down at his notes, but the words no longer matter. The audience, both in the studio and across the nation, is no longer listening to his scripted jabs. Their attention is firmly fixed on Karoline. The energy in the room has shifted entirely. What started as a hostile interview has evolved into a decisive turning point. The shift is unmistakable. Karoline has not just held her ground, she's fundamentally altered the course of the conversation. The host, knowing he's losing his grip, attempts one final dig, but his voice lacks the authority it once had. You know, Karoline, you're not the only one who has a platform. I've been doing this for years. What makes you think your voice will matter in the end? Karoline leans back, a calm smile playing across her lips. Because my voice is real. It's not manufactured to fit a narrative. It's the voice of people who are tired of being told what they should believe and who they should listen to. She pauses for a moment, letting her words settle in the air, knowing they're hitting their mark. And that's what scares you. The host stares at her, stunned. The silence that follows is deafening. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The cameras catch the tension, zooming in on the faces of both combatants, but it's Karoline who has the last word. She isn't just here to defend herself anymore. She's here to win the battle of ideologies, and in this moment, she's victorious. The segment wraps up abruptly as the producer signals that time is running out. As the host mutters a distracted, "Thanks for being here, Karoline." There's a palpable sense of discomfort in his voice. He's lost the upper hand, and everyone can see it. As the cameras cut, the lights dim, and the crew begins to pack up, Karoline stands, collecting herself with quiet confidence. The moment she exits the set, she is met by Sarah, her trusted producer and ally. There's no need for words. Sarah simply embraces her, a silent acknowledgement of the victory they both know this is. The car ride back to her apartment is surreal. Karoline stares out the window, watching the city's skyline. Blur past her, everything feels different now. She's always known that she was a force for change, but tonight, she proved it. Not just to others, but to herself. She can't help but reflect on the journey that led her here. From the quiet moments of doubt, the criticism, and the struggles, to this singular moment when her voice cut through the noise and silenced the critics. She's no longer the underdog, she's become a leader. The phone in her hand buzzes, pulling her from her thoughts. It's a message from a fellow conservative activist, someone who had been watching the interview. You nailed it. You showed them who you really are. This is only the beginning. Karoline smiles. It's a simple message, but it reinforces what she already knows. This is only the beginning. The road ahead will be filled with more battles, more challenges, and more opportunities to speak her truth. But tonight, she's won something far more important than a media skirmish. She's won the right to define herself on her own terms. As the car slows and she steps out into the night air, Karoline looks up at the stars, her face lit with a quiet sense of resolve. The game is changing, she whispers to herself, and I'm here to make sure it never goes back to the way it was. And with that, she steps forward, ready for whatever comes next.